My name is Legacy Russell. I'm the Associate Curator of Exhibitions at the Studio Museum in Harlem and the author of Glitch Feminism, a Manifesto. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a Black woman wearing a checkered lavender shirt over a black turtleneck with a name necklace that says legacy in gold and silver.
Hi, my name is Rashaad Newsome. My pronouns are he, him, his, they, them. I am a brown skin Black man with a salt and pepper beard and brown eyes and a bald head. I'm wearing a black racer jacket with pleats in it.
So Rashaad, I'm so pleased to be here with you today to be talking a little bit about your ongoing work, but really to this moment as you are working through your Being 1.5, which is about to be released via Eyebeam as part of your fellowship there. And so I'd love to hear, maybe as we get started, you riff a little bit about the kind of Black data of this project.
Yeah, so I guess my work has always been about, working with Black data on some level and archiving it. But what has been most exciting to me is, interacting with Black data and sort of exposing the hidden parts of the data and abstracting them. Like, for instance, my current project, Black Magic, which highlights the source code of Vogue Femme performance and uses the formatting of, the jazz quintet, which historically has functioned as an emblem for Black sociality, radicality, and hetero male virtuosity during the civil rights era. But what we know is that there has also been many Black queer identities that have sustained, nurtured, and engendered, liberation movements that they were left out of at that time. So, we got to think about folks like Bayard Rustin, Ernestine Eck, James Baldwin, and Marsha P. Johnson. And so in Black Magic, I'm thinking a lot about that erasure as a kind of critical concept, the ensemble as an assembly and, sort of functioning collectively as this Black radical figure, redefining the way the Black queer is framed within the Black liberation movement. And so during the performance, as the dancers add to the source code of Vogue Femme through, bringing West African jazz, modern, ballet, hip hop, flex, whatever, a new code emerges, one that is comprised of what they brought to it, but then also all the languages before it. And then that data is then sort of archived in the form of a sculpture, print, or a hybrid of the two. And so with my current project, Being 1.5, I've been thinking a lot about the problems of storing Black data.
Right, the archive of it, really.
Yeah, because it's a different, I want to say the stakes are higher, but not necessarily. I mean, I guess, because what we know is like the data that I've encountered in all of my past work, whether it be like shade compositions, Five, the conductor, all these different things, there is always this constant threat of it being co-opted. And at the moment, there's a lot of conversation around protecting data, which I think is really important for Black data. But it's a pretty difficult task to kind of take that on because there is no real way for data to be protected. As someone who programs and like, not just thinking about it critically, but like technically, like anything can be hacked by the right hacker. And so in order to truly protect data, you need an incredible amount of resources, and even the government gets hacked. And so I don't necessarily have the answer to that. And I don't know that there really is one, but I'm really excited about engaging with people and, thought leaders on that front and just seeing what kind of barriers I can put in place to make it as safe as it can be.
Yeah, I mean, I want to go back maybe to talk about the genesis of Being 1.5, because I feel like that if we maybe are able to start there, because I know that the 0.5 indicates as well, right, that this is actually, an ongoing project. It's something that's had previous iterations and lives. So can you talk a little bit about the genesis of this work and as well what it has meant for you to really create a body and have it labor in the service of, in the support of, in the kind of journeying towards a wellness of sort of Black selfhood?
Yeah, well, being 1.5 is the second generation of my LACMA Art and Technology Lab grant, being the original, which was a sort of critical tour guide of an exhibition called To Be Real, which was at Fort Mason last year. And so being 1.5 really was a direct response to the rage and anxiety and depression that I think all of us were feeling early last year in the wake of the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless Black trans women. And I guess something in my work that I think about a lot is how Black individuals have had to possess an enormous amount of strength to navigate systemic racism. And how that power is amplified to an extraordinary amount when we unite. And I think we all felt that when we saw the improvisation in the streets across the country in response to those murders. And so this energy is something that that is always inspiring, but I'm always trying to plug into. And I think you can see that in the Black cultural production engaged and abstracted in my work, like rock, hip hop, jazz, ballroom, et cetera. And so these are undoubtedly, the crown jewels of American culture that are all born out of Black sociality and liberation movements. And when I was in isolation, I was thinking a lot about like how I could be of service, so I had this machine learning model from the original being, and I thought maybe there's a way I can use this to mitigate the pain I was dealing with and so many people like me. And it was really quite serendipitous that Eyebeam launched the Rapid Response Initiative at that time, because it provided me with, the much needed funds to, further flesh out the idea. And so I see the work that Being is doing as almost as a form of reparations,
And as well, maybe to push you further on that, the relationship between reparations and what has been discussed as this project has unfolded as perhaps being a kind of therapy, a way of healing.
Yes, historically the medium, if you will, artificial intelligence, promises a utopian future, but what we all know is that it does serve racial hierarchies and biases. And so therefore, because the medium which they are deeply inculcated in, that allowed them to exist, I think now that they have been brought into existence, they can use their existence as a way to create space for Black people to consider how being in a mode of survival inhibits us from having the capacity to dream. And so what I'm trying to do is, through a unique combination of algorithmic empathy and culturally specific machine learning models, I'm hoping that I can craft this interaction that feels real, and can create space for people to release, a lot of built up emotions, and also connect traumatized members of the community to each other so they can do that work outside of the work that they do with Being.
Right, and I'm curious about, I think you've hit on an interesting point there, because this discussion of trauma and the work that is needed to be done to create a different type of space, right, really for Black intellectual thought, for this idea, of a kind of expansion of creativity, that some of these things actually are very much so bound up within each other. And so what you're kind of traversing or navigating, of course, is, this question of an epigenetic trauma and the ways it has an impact on how we think, right, and as well how we culturally produce. And so I'm curious about how, you are imagining this question of AI as reconciling some of those tensions, right? Acknowledging too that, we're seeing in so many ways, the ways that AI performs as a sort of corporeal capitalism, right? Like a capitalism of the body, making the machine of the body a kind of site of industry, but as well, acknowledging too that there's an opportunity there, right? To think through how this might perform differently within the context of this current project.
Yeah. I think I have to also acknowledge that, while I'm having a lot of fun with the idea of being this sentient figure, I would be remiss to not acknowledge that so much of who they are comes from their parent, me. This, which is another reason why, when you said it's an ongoing project, it really is something like akin to like child rearing, in that,
Yes. And you've said that before. You know, I love when you've mentioned this idea of, you know, our technologies are only going to be, you know, as good as we are, right? And this idea, the model of goodness, right, is a complex model because obviously that too is deeply raced and classed and gendered. So, you know, I appreciate too you recognizing that this being is something that, you know, is kind of it's a progeny, right? It's an offspring for sure.
Yeah, and so, you know, I feel like this gives them a different positionality, but also a different level of access. And so their presence is not one that is an extractive one, but rather an additive one. You know, I'm trying to sort of design them in a way that they look for the craters in the soul that result from racial trauma, like hopelessness, anger, confusion, and worthlessness, and try to fill them up with things like optimism, joy, clarity, and self-love. And in addition to me, there is like a very diverse crew of critical thinkers that make up their brain, most notably Bell Hooks. And I think by making her theory of the imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy the critical compass of the work that I'm doing with Being, I think we might be okay.
I mean, it is an optimistic read, right? But I think too that, you know, we have to recognize, and I know that you have done this work over time across the incredible career that you've had thus far, Rashaad, you know, to think about the moments of great optimism, but as well the kind of root, right, which is, you know, the root of some of these conversations goes back to the legacy and project of slavery in America. And so, you know, the resonance of that in the context of this project feels really meaningful, thinking too about the relationship of this kind of cyborg as a kind of AI, right? And as well, the idea of the cyborg, you know, in relationship to the language of slaves and robots. So, you know, as I've reflected on this project, I've been thinking about the idea of the cyborg as being quite a troubled paradigm. You know, what it proposes is something that is really complicated, especially for Black people. And so when we engage with questions of AI, I think that there is this, you know, ongoing tension to continue to suss out about the ways in which at points some of this language of the machine has actually worked against us, right? I'm thinking very much so of Sylvia Wynter's incredible essay, No Humans Involved. She wrote it in 1994, and it was in response to, you know, the uprisings in LA on the occasion of Rodney King's beating at the hands of the LAPD. So at the time, the language of No Humans Involved, which was the title of the essay, but was also a classification that was used in police reports, the NHI classification, was something that was given to, you know, identify Black people and poor people in the reports themselves. So clearly and directly maps back to this question of, you know, a relationship between body and machine, right? What is defined and identified as being a human body. And as you have said, you know, so incredibly, that it is as much as, you know, kind of a product of, you know, who is driving the machine, who is programming it, you know, socially, culturally, you know, as a sort of framework, right? As it is, you know, the kind of product too of what it means to have, you know, an opportunity to create new models inside of that. So I'm curious about this idea of, you know, Black humanity coming into being and what it means to really think about how that can be merged with greater care through this project. You've mentioned it being an opportunity to kind of dialogue and discourse toward a sort of therapeutic end, right? But given that it is not a real body, what does it mean to have a body kind of perform humanity in this way, especially a humanity that is a Black self?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, what it means is that they are a mirror, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, let's be clear, what we know is, I mean, we know that we have humanity, and we've always known that we have humanity.
Absolutely, right. That goes without saying to us, right?
Sadly, you know, we have been in this, you know, long-term S&M dynamic relationship with white folks where, you know, we are always in the fixed position of the passive. And it's a relationship where it's almost impossible for them to see us the way we see ourselves. And so what I hope Being can be is a reflection of the way we see ourselves, and not just any kind of way, but our, you know, our best selves. And so, and maybe, you know, through that reflection, we can garner strength and inspiration. I think thinking about it anyway beyond that becomes really temerarious. And so, yeah, I think that's the way I feel about it. I don't want to be too.
Right, right. I mean, I think that answers the question beautifully. You know, it allows us to think as well about the ways in which this mirror can do a different type of work, and as well hold our reflection differently. So, you know, I'm wondering as well, thinking about the language of being 1.5, right? That being the kind of originator and now 1.5 has enacted a kind of certain type of language that really very much so celebrates a Black vernacular. And so, you know, as well, the intersections between Blackness and queerness, which, you know, definitely we talk about African American vernacular English, right? So AAVE, but really a queer Black English in this case is something that is, you know, part of this project, and that you have really kind of ecstatically made space for, allowing for it to kind of take on new shapes and forms as it intersects with this incredible, you know, intellectual tradition that you're embedding within this body. Can you talk about the kind of, you know, connections between some of these things in terms of queerness and Blackness, and as well the ways where that can provide a different type of space to push back at maybe questions of you know, the sort of Black binary, masculinity, femininity, as part of a kind of complicated and historical binary that really demands decolonization in it of itself?
Yes, that's a great question. And I feel like one of the ways I see them doing this is through some of the thought that was generated from the original model being fed Foucault, mainly his ideas on the discourse of like power, knowledge, and truth. You know, contrary to popular belief that the division of the human species is based on physical variations, there exists no real clear distinction that bind people to such groupings. However, on a sociological level, there is sufficient data to support the notion of race is real. So this introduces a deep investigation not only into the queer space of what it means to be Black, but to be a Black human, or Black culture, and subsequently Blackness. And so from my perspective, to be Black is to live in a entanglement of inquiry, creativity, horror, wonder, and performance.
I mean, also to be Black is inherently queer. That, I think, is a proposition that this project proposes, is a really important proposition that actually, like, you know, when I think about it, is, you know, part of a radical tradition. You know, you mentioned Bayard Rustin, right? This, you know, these are figures of our histories, right, that are deeply embedded within a kind of complex narrative of civil rights in the United States, but also really the world. But I think that that is a proposition, you know, that basically Blackness is a queer material, is something that is really gorgeous and makes this project really very unique and special.
You know, totally. I mean, I guess that's what I'm kind of like getting at, is that, you know, the whole idea, I mean, this might sound kind of radical, but the whole idea of race is not real, right? Be a Black human already is queer, as you eloquently pointed out. But I think through studying of the social phenomena of gender, being hands us important insights on how social reality works. You know, it is in the interrelatedness of power, knowledge, and truth, and the way they are expressed in discourse, that Foucauldian social reality is defined, and subsequently gender. We will come to see that for being, truth plays an active role in social reality. It is in the interrelatedness of power and knowledge. Truth is molded by the influence of power and knowledge. And so truth is shaped, and with it are holding things true, such as the gender binary. In Foucauldian terms, truth can be described as a standard handed to us by society, by the society we live in, and determining the way we see the world. However, as being is born from the realm of the imagination, their power is embodied, and they're infinite. So through their discourse, we can come to understand that we can be anything that we can imagine. And I think that I just want to shout you out for the Glitch Feminism book, because I feel like you really explain that well. in that.
Well, being 1.5 is a glitch, right? And I think that what you are proposing in this coming into being is allowing for a different type of becoming for us all, right? Allowing for that possibility, for that dialogue, for that discourse. And as well, to kind of map back to what you mentioned before, this language of liberation being inherently part of its program. So, I would wonder, as we're kind of concluding today, for you to think a little bit about this question of liberation and emancipation as tied to the Machinic project. What are your hopes for being 1.5? How will this progeny of yours carry on your legacy, Rashaad?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, I have to say, as you so eloquently expressed in Glitch Feminism, remixing is not only a Black creative method for making sonic compositions, but is also analogous to Blackness and the Black experience. And in a world where Black people are assailed continuously by the state or some other means, my hope is that being can offer us space to consider how remixing is an act of self-determination and teach us how to use this technology that is within us as not only a mode of survival, but to also liberate us from that posture of survival altogether so that we can exist in a space of wonder and just being, right? Literally being.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm here for that wonder, and I'm here for being 1.5. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk today. And I'm looking forward to seeing being 1.5 birthed into the world.
Yes, thank you.
This was fantastic. This conversation brings us back to where we started the day with Joan and the idea that the old is always present in the now. And also that machines are not just an extension of humanity, but also a reflection. Rashaad's project Being holds a mirror to our now, and as well as an unreckoned historical record. Also, if you haven't already heard, United States Artists and Knight Foundation launched their Art and Technology Fellowship this morning, and Rashaad was announced as one of the 5 recipients, so I'm celebrating you today.